Do you enjoy creepy horror stories? Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more spooky videos from Scare Street.
The Tinkerbell Factor by David Longhorn. Fairies! Donald J. Tellson couldn't believe he was saying the word. He was saying the word fairies in the middle of a muddy field in a God-forsaken part of Ireland. He had flown 3,000 miles and then flown an extra 100 in a chopper to have a conversation in a muddy field about fairies. Sean Malone, the project manager, looked suitably embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Tellson, but it's what the locals say." "Fairies," Tellson repeated. "Goddamn fairies?" He couldn't get past the word somehow. He had arrived in Clonmara expecting a labor dispute, but Malone's emails and 2 phone calls had not produced any clear account of what was wrong. Now Tellson realized why. The Irishman had not wanted to sound like a complete moron, which he evidently was. "Walk with me here, Sean," said Tellson, trying to keep his voice level. "Let's check out the scale of this problem." He set off, Wellington squelching in the peaty mud. The whole area around the little town of Clonmara was damp with regular Irish rain. It was situated right on the rugged, picturesque west coast of the island. When Tellson had checked it out a year earlier, he had noted the views of the Atlantic, the picturesque hills inland, the open fields. It was ideal for a golf resort. Nobody had mentioned the fairy castle. "So let's get this clear," Tellson said as they reached the edge of the field and came to the 14th hole. "You've got it more than half done?" "As you can see, sir," Malone said eagerly, "we've got it 3/4 done at least. All the facilities, the bar, hotel, the lot are pretty near finished. It's just a question of the 15th hole. The men would like a little deviation from the planned course." Tellson felt anger rising again as he looked at the 14th green, the fine, straight fairway, the nice little bunker to one side, and to the other, a kidney-shaped pond. There were some trees, obviously a copse of old growth, hiding the actual green. Tellson checked out the teeing area and found it satisfactory. Then, still interrogating Malone, he walked briskly up the fairway. "Okay," he said. "I'll bite. What is a fairy castle?" "Well, sir," Malone said, "it's an ancient fort, kind of a circular earthwork, thousands of years old, and some people think they have links to the 𝐒𝐲. 𝐒𝐲? That's Old Irish, right? And it means fairies, like Tinkerbell in that dumb movie?" Malone didn't meet his eye, but nodded. "Local people do believe in this old legend, sir. Farmers tend not to plough or graze cattle on areas with the forts. New roads have been diverted around them. It's supposed to be bad luck to disturb them." Tellson thought of his board of directors back in New York. He imagined him trying to explain why the project was 3 weeks behind schedule. He heard himself say the word fairies and the silence that would follow. Then the laughter, the glances, the looks that said, "Well, the old Donster's finally lost it. Time to find another CEO for Golf Global Resorts." And then the farewell bash. "You had a good run, Donnie, but when you let Tinkerbell and her pals beat you, we knew it was time to find a young buck who's a little less fragile." He could hear that slimy bastard Curtis saying fragile, or worse, in need of professional help. "Tinkerbell," he grated, interrupting Malone's ongoing flow of BS about all the stuff he had done. "Friggin' Tinkerbell." They reached the little wood and skirted around it. The trees, seen close up, were ancient, twisted things, not well furnished with leaves on this July morning. Perhaps that explained the abundant undergrowth, the lack of shade allowing all kinds of weeds to flourish. Tellson did not like nature much. Nobody who runs golf courses for a living did. Nature was troublesome animals digging up the turf, weeds sprouting on the green, predatory birds swooping down to seize a rich man's balls. The last image was particularly unwelcome. Tellson shoved it aside and snapped out a series of detailed questions about labor costs, overtime payments, local health and safety inspections, adverse media coverage. He took pleasure in reducing the big Irishman almost to tears. Malone towered over Tellson's 5'7", and bullying bigger men who lacked his power always gave the CEO a real buzz. "This is the castle, sir," said Malone, now evidently relieved to be able to deflect his superior from a potentially endless list of minor issues with one big one. "As you can see, it's not much, but it's enough." It was about 30 feet across, a vaguely defined ridge that did indeed form a circle. The ridge was about 3 inches high, but varied a little. Inside it, the grass was much higher. Clearly someone had cut back the vegetation, but balked at actually going inside the ring. This was not because a mowing machine couldn't get inside the circle. There was a 2-foot gap. "I suppose that's the gateway of the castle, right?" Tellson said derisively. "So they say, sir." Malone was shamefaced again, red in the cheeks. The color made a satisfying contrast with his pale skin. The Irishman was arguably a typical Celt, with his freckles and red hair, and, Tellson felt, his peasant mentality. "Okay, let's take a look at it." Tellson began to walk around the ring, peering into the clump of wildflowers, trying to see any genuine reason to be afraid. A glistening insect with transparent wings rose and shot toward him. He dodged involuntarily as the bug, maybe a dragonfly, passed close to his head. He thought he heard a titter right by his ear and spun round to glare at Malone. The Irishman's expression did not hint at disrespect. No, the guy was clearly afraid for his job and his rep. "So, what happens if I trespass on the friggin' fairy domain?" Before Malone could answer, Tellson had stepped over the little ridge and planted a muddy boot firmly on the other side. He walked across the circular enclosure, stirring up more humming, iridescent insects as he kicked the heads off dumb flowers. The bugs swooped and dived, and for a second he feared being stung. The creature's humming became louder, menacing. Tellson waved his arms, almost lost his balance. One tiny flyer ruffled his hairpiece, but then they were gone, and he was just standing in a round patch of grass, feeling sweat trickling from his pits. "This is bullshit," he exploded, striding back out of the ring. "What use are the hotel and the spa and the pool and the restaurant if people can't play goddamn golf? Sean, my man, I want this gone. Bring in contractors from Dublin or whatever dumbass Irish city is closest. Demolish this. Pay them double or triple if you like." "Yes, sir," Malone said, looking as if he'd been told to take out a contract on a favorite aunt. "And, by the way, bad luck." Tellson stared, feeling himself reddening. "What? What did you say?" "You asked me what happens if you trespass inside the fort, sir," Malone said, this time looking Tellson straight in the eye. "They say it brings bad luck." "Horse-pucky!" Tellson strode off, back up the course to his golf cart. Without waiting for his subordinate, he squeezed his generous butt into the little seat and drove the cart back to the resort hotel. A couple of times he thought he glimpsed flashes of blue-green darting past, saw the blur of tiny, fast-beating wings, but when he turned to look, all he saw was Ireland, ancient and clad in far too many shades of green for his taste. The hotel was okay for a place with no guests, apart from a half-dozen of the senior site managers. The bar was open to locals, though few could afford the prices, so it was half empty when Tellson rocked up for a pre-lunch whiskey. Some of the GGR team avoided Tellson in the bar. Some tried to curry favor. He noted the names of the former and was rude to the latter. He also dealt with a local yokel, pointing out that he was wearing sneakers and insisted that the staff throw the peasant out. That put him in a good mood, and he had a huge lunch, pointing out to the idiotic waitstaff that Americans eat bigger portions and telling them to bring him 2 of everything. Then he went upstairs to sleep it off, but not before going on Twitter to deliver a few home truths to bleeding-heart assholes who promoted dirty hoaxes like climate change and such. Once he had done that, he took off his toupee, kicked back on the king-size bed, and broke wind luxuriously. "Well, aren't you a sight for sore eyes?" It took him a moment to open his eyes. When he did, he saw a beautiful girl looking down at him. She was dark-haired, dark-eyed, with pale skin and very red lips. He struggled to sit up. Now he saw that she was wearing the uniform of a maid. Then he focused more closely and saw that it was not the sort of maid's costume any respectable outfit would impose on its female staff. "More's the pity," he thought, surveying a nice, deep cleavage and plenty of thigh. How did you get in here?" "I have special access, Donny," said the girl. "I was sent to get to know you, make you welcome in our fair land. You know, that sort of thing." "Ah," he said. "Now I get it. Malone trying to take the heat off a little, huh?" The girl sat on the bed, her short skirt riding up to show even more flesh.
"Sean Malone is a very wise man, in his way," she said. "He knows his job, that one, and he knows his place, which is important. You could do a lot worse."
The girl's manner was not as flirty as he liked, and he nearly said so. But then Telson considered how sexy she was, and that he was not in the U.S. He had to be careful about some things. It occurred to him that the room might even be bugged, that Malone could have decided to save his job and maybe even get a bonus with some hidden cameras and a high-class hooker. It was a trick Telson had pulled a few times himself. "Okay. Hey, what do I call you?" he asked.
"Call me Faye," she smiled. "It's as good a name as any."
"Okay, Faye," he said, struggling to sit up again. "You're a fine piece, but I didn't order room service. You catch my drift? I have a lovely wife and family back home, so if you're thinking of any hanky-panky, think again, missy." Telson hoped that, if there was a microphone nearby, it was picking him up clearly.
"Oh, Donny, that's very disappointing,"
said Faye, putting a finger to the corner of her mouth in a way that made him very aware of his far-from-healthy heart.
"I'd hoped to spend some quality time with you, talking about golf."
"Golf?" He gawked at her, then laughed. No way would some Irish call girl be interested in the game that was, to him, the most important thing in life. The only reason Telson had built up GGR using his inherited fortune was that he wanted to play golf every day if he could. Indeed, one of the things that had infuriated him about Malone's failure was that he could not play a full round at Clonmara.
"Golf,"
repeated the girl.
"I find it amusing sometimes. I particularly like the little windmills, and I've heard there's one with dinosaurs, which sounds like fun."
Telson stared at her, then laughed uncertainly. Was she mocking him? "You're not talking about real golf, young lady." Faye reached out for the hairpiece on its stand, picked it up, and twirled it around a graceful finger.
"Well, what's real and what's not are things I've always had trouble with," she said, contemplating the fake hair.
Telson snatched his toupee and jammed it onto his head, then swung his legs off the bed to check himself in the dressing-table mirror. He sat in the chair there, and after a minute or so, he had the hair adjusted so that it looked natural. Better than natural, in fact, so far as he was concerned. "Reality is that money talks, sugar," he said, swiveling round on the creaking chair. "And I can make your life difficult if you give me any more sass. Now get out of my room. I'm calling the manager." He got up to go for the phone on the bedside table. Faye, with startling agility, seemed to do a kind of lightning-fast backflip and was suddenly standing in front of him. She was as tall as he was and wore shiny high heels. For the first time, he noticed that her outfit and her shoes were not, in fact, black. Seen up close, they were very dark green.
"The manager isn't the boss of me, Donny," she purred, reaching up to touch his cheek with a small, cool hand. "And neither are you. Now, about your golf course. Why don't you make the fort into a hazard, like a pond or one of those silly sand pits? Then people would try to avoid it, wouldn't they now? And if someone needs to go in and retrieve their little balls, well, that would be a bit of fun for all concerned."
Her face was closer to his now, and Telson smelled an intense sweetness, as if her breath was scented with the essence of thousands of wildflowers. And he noticed something else. He had thought of her as a girl, maybe even a teenager. But in fact, her skin was so flawlessly pale, her eyes such perfect pools of blackness, her features utterly symmetrical, that she seemed ageless, inhuman, as if he were looking at a mask, or something worse than a mask. "Makeup," he grunted, stepping back in case their proximity was being caught on video. "You've got too much makeup on, Toots. It makes an older woman look cheap. Get out, or I could call the cops. You want that?"
"Oh, Donny," she sighed. "You and me, we're alike. The laws of man don't apply to us." She started to caress him again, her hand straying from cheek to neck to the front of his shirt and then toward his waistband. He slapped the little hand away, angry at her for trying to control the situation, to presume to make him aroused at her convenience. That was not how women should be. "Get out of here, you slut!" He grabbed her questing hand and shoved her, hard, but not as hard as he wanted to. He was still thinking of hidden cameras. He wished he could be sure there were none, because then he could have given the creepy little bitch what she deserved. But again, his heart was pounding so hard it couldn't be ignored. Faye did not fall onto the bed as he expected. In fact, she didn't totter backward on those high heels at all. She simply took one swift step back, then stood looking at him, head tilted to one side. It was so impertinent, so devoid of the fear he needed to instill in the little people, that he lost control and took a swing, open-handed, at her perfect face. She ducked and dodged like a very different kind of pro. Telson, furious now, lost his balance and ended up face down on the rug. The impact winded him badly, and now his heart was protesting so loudly at the exertion and stress that he could barely hear her speaking. Perhaps she intuited this somehow, as he saw a sheer stockinged knee appear in his field of vision, followed by that maddeningly impassive face. "Bad boy, Donny. That's no way to behave now, is it? Did your mother raise you to disrespect women?"
"Shut up! Don't you dare mention my mother, you slut!" He flailed at her, this time with a clenched fist. Again she seemed to suddenly be somewhere else, and his fist connected with the leg of the bed. He howled in pain and rage as bones crunched.
"Ah, will you look at the poor little fat man now, getting himself all worked up like a prize idiot."
She was somehow behind him now, and he tried to roll over. But when he finally managed to do so, she simply planted a tiny foot firmly on his chest. It was the kind of thing some of his pals paid good money for, but it wasn't his scene. He tried to grab her ankle, but she pushed down, and he felt a sharp pain as her heel dug in. He stopped struggling and lay gasping as slobber ran out of the side of his mouth.
Now listen to me, Jonathan Tellson, golfer and tycoon, abuser of women and general world-class wanker,
said Faye, her voice suddenly devoid of all that Celtic charm.
You give up on trashing that fort, or you will pay. Remember Tam Lin. He escaped. You will not. Think on it.
She smiled with real cruelty now and whispered urgently,
Close your eyes, little man. Close your eyes now.
Faye lifted her greenish-black shoe and brought it down toward his face. He flinched and turned aside, covering his face with his hands.
No!
He shouted. There was a loud sound that he could not quite process as he waited for her heel to rip into flesh. But the heel did not connect. He opened his eyes and looked around the room. He was alone, and his hairpiece had fallen off.
That sound, he thought. What the hell?
It had sounded a little like the tearing of cloth, but a lot more like the beating of wings. Tellson spent the next hour tearing the hotel manager a new one. He calmed enough to take in that security camera footage would be used to determine who had accessed his room, and the police would be informed. Then he calmed some more and told them not to bother the dumb hick police of the county, who, in his opinion, would be too busy chasing potato thieves and pig molesters. The manager, a 40-something Dublin woman with nice big boobs but short, fat legs and a face that was at best a 6, seemed relieved.
And you'll still be staying the night with us, sir? She asked. I must apologize again.
Yeah, of course I'm staying the night, he snorted. It's not like there's anywhere else to go in this dump.
He was about to dismiss the woman when a thought occurred to him.
Hey, is there a guy around here called Tamlin? Tamlin? Something like that?
The woman looked puzzled and a little scared, as if he was putting her to a test. He liked that, and let his gaze linger on the puppies pushing out her neat white blouse while she hesitated.
There's a Tom Flynn, she said finally. One of the greenskeepers, I think. I can make inquiries.
Nah, never mind. You can go, he said. Just get your act together, lady. This is supposed to be a 5-star hotel for the best people, the very best people.
Then he called Malone and told him in no uncertain terms to bring in contractors and flatten the goddamn ferry fort. He felt a grim satisfaction at the thought that the locals would be angry, dismayed, frightened. Maybe one of those superstitious jerks had actually hired that Faye. She didn't seem like a typical Irish village girl. And those moves. Tellson shrugged off the thought. His people would find her and then she would pay. No, there was no need to contact the police. He knew people who knew people, even in Ireland. Assuming this crummy little nation built megamalls or whatever, Faye's bruised and broken body would be cemented into the next one. He chuckled at that thought all through dinner. He was leaving the hotel restaurant when the manager approached him with the all-too-familiar, "I'm screwed" expression. It turned out that the security cameras in the lobby, the elevators, and outside his suite had recorded precisely nothing.
You're fired, he yelled. Get out!
The woman blanched and started to say something about a period of notice. He wanted to punch her fat, ugly face, but instead he shoved her aside and headed for the elevators, cursing out a dozen or so nobodies who were pointedly not looking. He went back to his suite, broke a few things, then raged at minorities on Twitter for 2 or 3 hours.
Now, Donny, we did warn you now, didn't we?
He woke up in total darkness, but sensed movement all around him. He reached for the light switch, but forgot where it was, because he was in an unfamiliar room. Something touched his hand, a scratchy, fast-moving thing. He jerked his hand back and squeaked in panic, a sound so high-pitched it dismayed him.
Bad, bad lad, so you are.
It was Faye's voice, playful but menacing, and too damn close.
"Defying the injunction of a queen, and you a mere commoner. Now you'll have to pay the price."
"You don't scare me,"
he bellowed, hoping someone nearby could hear him. He remembered his phone and snatched for it, found the smooth, rounded corner. He switched it on, and the screen lit up with a picture so horrifying that it took him a moment to grasp what it showed.
"Oh, my God!"
"The power of seeing the future, Donny, is granted to few men," said Faye.
"I don't know how you did this, you evil bitch, but you will not be bothering anyone ever again."
He fumbled with the controls and managed to turn on the light. It cast a pale blue glow, feeble in the huge room, but still strong enough to illumine the creature that stood by his bedside.
"Oh, Jesus Christ!"
It was Faye. But this time she wasn't wearing her naughty maid costume. In fact, she was wearing nothing at all. That would once have aroused him, but now he quailed in terror. The creature that loomed over him was neither a woman nor an insect, but some nightmare combination of both. Two pairs of huge transparent wings gave a quick flap, ruffling his hairpiece on its stand. Her face was still a pretty, heart-shaped visage, but the eyes were now all black, compound eyes like those of an ant or a wasp, glistening with inhuman malice. But it was her body that made him soil his pajama pants. As she moved closer, climbing onto the bed with her many glistening, slender legs, he saw faint traces of breasts on the shiny dark green carapace that was now her chest. The little hard mounds reminded him of the circular ridge on the golf course that he knew he would not see destroyed. More limbs unfolded and reached for him, sharp claws catching the sides of his head as she came closer. The roughly cylindrical body of the monster tapered to a tiny thorax, then flared out to a bulging abdomen that twitched as it settled lightly on his legs.
"You were warned."
He yelled even louder, unable now to remember any of the ways to call for help on his phone.
"No! No, leave me alone! This is not happening! Help! Help me!"
The Faye thing chuckled, a sound all the worse because it sounded so girlish, so very human.
"Nobody will get here in time, Donny lad. It's just you and me. One man with a mere 6 decades, and a sovereign of this land with thousands of years to refine her art. Now, I believe in making the punishment fit the crime. So here we go."
He struggled, but her serrated limbs tore his flesh away in strips, and she laughed. She pulled his face closer, and a sharp tongue flicked across her thin black lips, and then she kissed him good night, almost as a loving mother might kiss a frightened child, but not quite. Marie O'Brien urged the elevator on, wishing it would go faster, or maybe just drop like a stone and kill her then and there. Either was better than this waiting. Beside her, the security guard looked even more nervous than she felt. Tellson's reputation had preceded him, and everyone at Clonmara had been expecting the worst, but still hoping for the best. It had taken less than 5 minutes from the man's arrival to confirm that the pessimists had been right. But Marie was disturbed now for another reason. Another guest's frantic call to reception had been put through to her office, where she was working late, hoping against hope that such commitment might make the CEO change his mind. They told her that, at first, they had heard the man in the room next to theirs yelling at someone, fury in his voice, but then he had sounded frightened, in pain, and panicky. After asking for the caller's room number, Marie had known exactly who the man in trouble was. She had called an ambulance and was prepared to find a fat old man having a coronary. She had brought a defibrillator, having been trained in its use as per Irish government regulations. The security man had the first aid kit. When the elevator door slid open, she squeezed through the gap, raced along the corridor, and used her master key card, only to find that something was blocking the door. She heard groaning and sobbing through the stained wooden paneling.
"Mr. Tellson, sir, can you move back from the door? Michael, give me a hand here. Push."
Between them, they got the door open to find the room in darkness. Marie's heart lurched at the thought that the big boss was unable to reach the switch, had crawled across on all fours from the bed. She flicked on the light and looked down. Then she dropped the defibrillator on her foot. It was not a lightweight piece, but the pain didn't matter, because all Marie could do was scream.
"Well, it's a mad set of shenanigans, boss, and no mistake."
Michael sipped his tea and looked out of the office window, his handsome, calm face lit by the flickering lights of the ambulance and police cars. The resort's skeleton staff were milling around, each one in turn giving details to a confused police officer who was clearly following routine, because that was all he had.
"Apparently there'll be a team from Dublin arriving soon," she said, cupping her mug of tea in both hands. "Thanks for the tea, and for everything. I don't think I could have made it without you being there to, you know."
"I know," he said, smiling. "What are you going to tell them then? The big detective from the big city? I mean, we've no idea what happened. Have we?"
Marie shook her head.
"One minute he's saying somebody sent a floozy to his room. The next, oh God."
Michael put a strong arm around her shoulders as she cried some more. She wondered, even in her despair, if she was too old for him, too dumpy, too plain. He had plenty of admirers, but there'd been no sign of a girlfriend. Then, totally unbidden, a random thought popped into her head.
"Tam Lin," she said.
"Sorry."
She laughed, but somehow it seemed important.
"Does the name Tam Lin mean anything to you? I think it might be a person who was threatening him."
Michael frowned. "I've heard the name, but... now I remember."
He grinned.
No. Somebody was messing with the man, I reckon. It's not a real person. It's just some guy in an old folk song. Not even an Irish one. When I was in the British Army, there was a guy who used to sing these things. The border ballads and that. Yeah, Tam Lin."
Then his eyes widened.
"You know, that's bloody strange. Because, well, the song is to do with fairies and all that."
Marie felt herself grow cold. She was not a local, but she had heard the stories. At first she had ignored them, even laughed, but the villagers and people in the county at large were serious about what they called the old ones. You showed them respect and left them alone, or else. That was the prevailing view, and not just among the elderly and ignorant.
"How does the song go?"
she asked.
I can't remember,"
he said at first, but she urged him to try to recall it. And eventually he did, and told her. And they clung to each other some more, and later they found solace in each other in her little room, and never talked about the Ballad of Tam Lin again. But she never forgot the last line, the one delivered by the Queen of Faery to the mortal man who defied her. And she thought of Donald J. Tellson, the man who lived for golf, for the sight of his little white ball flying down the fairway.
"And then up spoke the Fairy Queen. 'Tam Lin, if I had known, I would have pulled out both your eyes to give you eyes of stone.'"
Click the link in the description or search Scare Street on Audible for a list of all our bone-chilling titles. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more spooky videos from Scare Street. See you in the shadows.